Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Fistful of Dice. My name is Matt, coming to you live from the cockpit of a gigantic mech. And tonight, I am joined by my colleague, my friend, my stepbrother, because his dad married my mom, and I can't think of anything else. Tim Kearney from Tabletop Terrors is going to be DMing for me tonight, and we're going to be playing the Mecha Hack, recently released through Absolute Tabletop. There are links down in the description to get the Mecha Hack if you don't have it. And if you like what you see tonight, if it seems cool to you, you should definitely check it out. So I'm going to toss it over to Tim to take it away, and I get to be a player tonight, so I'm pretty excited. Go ahead, Tim.
Dude, I'm super excited to run your first game of Mecha Hack.
Yeah, it is I was saying today on my stream earlier that is the plight of all game designers to never play the game that they've made.
And so I thought, let's do a one-on-one where all we have to do is line up two schedules and let's get this in before our convention coming up and before anything else. And so,
yeah.
And like most things, I start prepping it and I'm like, oh, what about this? And what about this? And so we are actually going to be playing in a mini setting that I am now brewing up. And the setting is called The Wound. It takes place on Earth in the not too distant future. And so I'm excited to have you explore The Wound for the first time.
Dude, and I know literally nothing about this setting, so I'm excited to check it out, man.
It's going to be awesome. The sprawling state of North Dakota. One of the few states not overrun by the swarm of titanic creatures known as the Wound. There are so many that we don't refer to the creatures as them anymore. Just it. The Wound. The Wound is deep. The Wound is wide. And the Wound is swallowing up humanity. All of the efforts to stop the Wound have ended in tragedy. All but one. The Crimson Meteors. The elite mecha squad that you, Matt, are a part of. And as your mecha crests a hill, you see the North Dakota mountains. It's a clear blue sky. You've reached your checkpoint, but you have about 5 minutes before you need to report in. What are you going to do in that 5 minutes?
My mech rumbles beneath me. I have it on autopilot right now. And as I crest this hill, I reach up and pull back on the throttle and bring the mech to a stop. It's a massive humanoid-looking machine with chipped and marred blood red paint splattered across the front of it. The colors of the Crimson Meteors. And there's like an orange, like falling star crest on the left side of this machine's chest. In one hand, it carries a massive axe, and kind of holstered, for lack of a better phrase, at its hip is this kind of it looks like a gigantic sawed-off scattergun. It's just this massive close-range weapon. And as I crest this hill and I see the clear blue sky and I see these mountains, I actually bring my headset down off my ears around my neck and I reach up and the cockpit depressurizes and the top and I let fresh air into the cockpit. I take a deep breath and mop the sweat from my brow that is not there necessarily from heat, but just from breathing the same air again and again and again and again and again. And I stand up in the cockpit and just kind of lean over the side and just take a few breaths of fresh air for probably the first time in a few hours.
the sun is high in the sky and the air is fresh and clean. And just as you relax, just as the scenery brings you away from this awful world we live in, you hear your comlink crackle to life.
Hello? Hey, you there?
I would sigh and then sink back into the well-worn chair held together by probably duct tape at this point. And I grab the comm link and put it back over my ears. Prophet Mammoth reporting in. Hearing you loud and clear. Over.
All right, Prophet. This here's Rufus. I've got your mission orders here. Let's go ahead and go through your weapons loadout, and let's get a checklist going. Pilot, want to make sure you're going into combat hot and ready. So go ahead and let's take it from the top down to the bottom here. What's your loadout as far as your ranged armaments?
Primary weapon is the throwing axe. Used in primarily melee, it can be used at range in a pinch. Secondary weapon is the scatter gun. Also armed with fold-out shield and testing out the experimental nano shroud for field repairs.
Okay. All right, pilot. Well, what we're going to need you to do here is, first, I'm going to have you clear some minds. What did they tell you about the mission?
In all honesty, they didn't tell me much. Just gave me the coordinates and told me I'd be flying solo. So here I am.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and hand you over to your normal handler here. He's going to go ahead and take over the comms here.
Roger that.
Hey, what's going on, man? It's Rufus.
Oh, hey.
All right. Sorry about that, guy. Things are pretty tight here at the compound. What do you know? I heard him say you don't really know anything.
No, honestly, was kind of pulled out of my bunk. I'm running on a couple hours of sleep here, given coordinates. Can you tell me what's going on?
It's weird stuff, man. So I don't know if you've heard yet, but basically everything east of Minnesota, it's all part of the wound again. We lost a lot of ground there over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I heard rumors of that.
Yeah, and everything from about the middle of Nebraska down, we're pushing, but well, that's why you're here. Have you heard anything about Paragon Crown?
I've heard the name tossed around the cafeteria a couple times. Some sort of top secret project supposed to change the course of the war, from what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, so they say. Some kind of big damn special new mecha. Something that supposed to be able to fight the wound. I mean, we've heard it all before, but this is supposed to be a little more real. And you're here to babysit it. We're gonna have to move it. It's not quite stable to be active, but you're gonna have to babysit it. It's gonna be a long, slow convoy.
All right, heard. Do I have any mech support, or am I it?
Yeah, you'll have. Well, Dagger Zero is going to be here. He's late as usual.
Good to know.
And Viking Eon is here with me. Our commander. She's hard at work. I think that they're suiting her up, outfitting her, training her to actually pilot the Crown.
Tell her I'll try not to scratch a new ride. And I thumb a few toggles and close the cockpit lid and pressurize the cabin once again.
And let's see here. We got... okay. We got Oracle. You there? Oracle Jigsaw. A sort of young-sounding female voice comes over the comms. Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. Oracle, was it?
Yeah, Oracle Jigsaw.
Prophet Mammoth. Good to know you.
Good to know you. I've heard a lot about you. A lot of good things.
Yeah. Well, the stories are exaggerated.
All right. Well, from what I understand, you're going to meet up with me at a rendezvous point. But until then, and then she sort of addresses Rufus, and he commands both of you. He essentially says, "Yeah, we've got some activity here in your area, Prophet. Essentially, well." And he mentions a word that you recognize, and I'll let you sort of decide what your dealings are with them. But he basically just says, salvagers.
All right.
You know the salvagers as they're these end-of-the-world nuts who believe that the wound is punishment, and they hide in bunkers. They're real, like, scorched earth, but they're deadly, and they're a little crazy, and they usually fire on sight.
I've tangled with these nut jobs before. I don't have an issue cleaning up. And then I would key a few switches and say, Oracle, I'm linking our transponders. You should be able to get a beat on me wherever I am in case we get separated here. But otherwise, plan on meeting at the rendezvous point after I've cleaned up this mess.
Roger that. Rufus, I'm going to go ahead and head over to the oil fields. See what that disturbance was. Over and out.
All right, Rufus, you want to telecom me those coordinates and I'll proceed to the area.
Yeah, so it looks like the activity for the salvagers was about 2 clicks ahead of where you are. Northeast. Didn't seem like much. We just saw a couple of blips, and we need to make sure that the path is clear before we go transforming and transferring Paragon Crown. So, yep, just a couple clicks ahead. Shouldn't be anything you're not used to.
Roger that. Toggling the seat warmers, and I'll reach up and turn on the reactor and basically get Prophet battle ready. And I reach up and push the throttle forward, and the machine starts. And I start to feel the heat from the reactor sort of coming up into the cockpit. I sort of settle back into the chair. Whoever thought it was a good idea to put the reactor under the cockpit? And I'll proceed forward basically until anything pops up on my radar. And I'm not really making any sort of effort to try and be unseen or quiet. I like a fair fight. I like them to see me coming.
Awesome. And your hulking form pushes forward as though a mountain itself moving. Just I think Prophet Mammoth is the second or first biggest mecha in the Crimson Meteors, depending on who's still alive. And as you sort of press on, Rufus comes back over the comms. Hey, Mammoth.
Yeah, reading.
I have some stuff that's sort of eyes only. I didn't want to let it slip in front of Oracle.
Okay. What do you got?
Something big out there. Something been popping up on the sensors, and it's deadly. It's huge. They've started calling it Annihilator.
They couldn't have picked a more subtle name.
Yeah, you know how it goes. It's ghost stories in the mess hall. I mean, thing is, just watch your back. I'm sure you'll see it coming, but well, here. And so Rufus transmits a sort of image of this thing, and I'm going to throw it to you, Matt, and just describe this enormous, vile creature known as Annihilator.
So if it's like a satellite image, I imagine that it's distant, it's grainy, it's kind of out of focus, but it gives a sort of feel for this thing's scale and just how massive it is, sort of dwarfing the landmarks and the buildings around it. I think that it sort of resembles an arachnid of some sort. It has multiple multi-jointed legs that hold up this sort of slouched, hulking form with a big underslung jaw on the front of it, with these tusks that sort of jut upward.
And Rufus is silent. And then he attempts to break the silence with a bit of a joke. So, if you do find it, don't go killing it without us.
That's this is by far the biggest one I've ever seen, Rufus.
Yeah. So, some guys sort of calling it the second wound.
Yeah. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. If I see this thing, I'm turning around and I'm heading towards reinforcements.
I think that's wise, pilot.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah. Over and out.
And I would continue on my course, and I would sort of like that satellite image that popped up on my HUD. I would sort of reach and grab it and kind of put it off to the side, but not close it. I would have it sort of that grainy, staticky sort of image. And as I'm moving forward and I feel the legs of my mech carrying me forward, I would keep glancing over at this image, just kind of trying to reckon just the sheer size and scope of this thing.
Yeah. And you're entering an area that's much more forested. So to your probably to your right is still sort of mountains and a lot of grasslands with the sparse copse of trees here and there. But where you're going into, much thicker tree lines, much taller trees. And while you still tower over them, there are trees that are as tall as you or even taller. So you are going into an area that is just difficult to see. Your visibility is pretty low, so your sensors are going to be working overtime.
Okay.
As you enter into this tree line, you can immediately see just some salvager junk, scraps. There must be a compound around here somewhere. The salvagers, as you know, they'll go onto the battlefield after the wound has sort of, wiped over the mecha, and they'll do their best to pick pieces, parts, carry it back, and make their own sort of patchwork mecha. Give me a mobility check.
That's barely a success.
Okay. You are able to your lumbering form, your enormous form is sort of able to just dodge this huge barrel that has these like antenna sticking out of it and like a walkie-talkie taped to it. And immediately you hear like, and your comms are jammed, even though this thing didn't hit you.
Gotcha. Okay. Could I tell where it came from?
Yeah, from the tree line a little bit to your left.
Okay, cool. Zeroing in on that area, do I see anything?
The lenses of some sort of tactical binoculars gleaming in the sun.
Okay. Okay, cool. I think I'm going to just as quickly as possible, I sort of reach down and pull out the scattergun, and it kind of like unfolds, and I bring it to bear, and I'm gonna kind of fire in that direction if I can.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So the scattergun is actually it's a heavy ranged weapon, so it's going to be a little harder to hit these guys.
Okay.
That's a 5 + 2, 7, so well under my power of 16. So that'll be a hit.
Sure.
Let me roll some damage here. 7 damage. So I just, it's just like this. Imagine a shotgun being the size of a car. Each barrel the size of a tire. Just this gigantic, and I imagine it like shreds any scrap piles or trees that it might meet on the way to these enemies.
And it does. It just cuts through the tree line, and you can immediately see 3 or 4 sort of patchwork armored people jumping out of the bushes, just like, and specifically, you hit dead on this patchwork sort of bipedal, like a hopper sort of mecha, and it just cuts the legs right off it, and the top of it just falls off. And you see these salvagers just scattering into the trees.
Perfect.
Roll a mobility test for me.
Another success.
I'm not sure what the inside of a cockpit sounds like. I'm not sure what the white noise, and I'm not sure how you hear the outside world specifically. But the bullet that whizzes past you is so big that you still hear, and it explodes the trunk of a tree directly next to you.
Oh man. Okay. Did it come from the same direction?
You cannot tell where it came from, but I will let you give me a system test at disadvantage to spot this enemy.
Ooh, that's gonna be rough. System's my low score. Holy crap. I've just rolled a 1 and a 4, which is awesome in Mecha Hack. So that's 2 successes on disadvantage.
About a half a click ahead of you, you see a salvager sniper. A lean mecha, patchwork together, copper-colored, rusty bits and pieces. But the rifle, very nice. And you can see it sort of taking the rifle stand up, and it can tell it's been spotted, and it starts cutting away.
Okay, cool. I think what I'd like to do, what distance is it away from me? Is it far? Is it?
So yeah, in game distance, it's far.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what I'd like to do, let's see. If I could make 2 move actions. No, actually, you know what?
What?
I know what I'll do. Okay.
Tell me.
So I'll use one action to move to within near range of it.
Okay.
So I push the throttle and I'm coming after this thing as he's running. I'd like to use my charging strike chassis ability to then I thumb these jump jets and I sort of fly through the air a little bit, and I'm going to bring this axe down on top of him. So that's going to require me to roll my reactor die twice. Once for moving twice and twice for using my charging strike. So I'm going to do that first. It's a D6. 5, 6. So I feel the heat as I'm pushing my mech. I just feel this heat just coming up off the reactor, but it maintains its integrity. So I come down on this thing with my axe. Let's see. That'll be a D8 damage. Missed. Okay, so I imagine I come down, but this thing, it's pretty quick, and it sort of like dodges out of the way, and my axe just sinks into the ground next to it. But I'm within close range of this thing, so.
Yeah, and as you just bolt through the woods, it's creating this tunnel. And there's kindling from these enormous trees just shattering around you. And as your axe hits the ground, this is a survivalist. This is a trained mecha. Maybe he served in the early Wound Wars, but immediately a bayonet slashes up at you without missing a beat. Roll mobility.
Failure with an 18.
All right, where does this bayonet sink into your armor?
I think I try to bring up my shield, and I have this retractable shield on my left forearm, and as I bring it up, it starts to unfurl, and the bayonet just slips past it as it starts to unfurl, and it sort of goes into the shoulder of my mech.
Perfect. And that's going to be 5 damage.
Whew. Okay, I'm going to burn some armor.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and burn 2 points of armor and take the 3 to my hit points.
Perfect. And he, as quickly as he stabs you with that bayonet, leaves it in you and flips and just starts tearing off as fast as he can. He doesn't get too far, though. He's still pretty close to you there.
Okay, cool.
But he's trying. He understands the situation he's in now.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and use my, I call it in my equipment, my axerang. So it's my axe. I used the weapon qualities table, and it's a throwing axe, which means I can throw it and then it'll come back to me.
Awesome.
So I'm going to try and hurl the axe into this sniper mech's back here.
Perfect.
That is a success with a 4, and I rolled max damage. Let's see. I'm also going to reduce my armor points by 2 to roll my damage die again, which is an ability that I get as a Maverick reckless attack. So 8, 14 damage total with this axe.
Oh, man. Describe to me what it looks like as you obliterate this salvager sniper.
So I wheel back with this axe, and I just, and this axe is the size of a tree, and it just end over end, and it's kind of wreathed in this energy, the same energy that I used to yank it back, and it goes through this mech's back, through the cockpit, out the front, and then I reach out, and it is magnetically pulled back, and it rips back through him and basically just obliterates him as it comes back to my hand. And I'm just, and I grab the axe, and it's covered in like oil and maybe even some blood from just like splitting this pilot in half. And the mech just falls into pieces. And I'm standing there just sort of like there's steam coming off of me from my reactor.
And as the steam rises, there's a haze. And through the haze, you hear the unmistakable sound of something flying toward you. And just hear, And I want you to give me 2 mobility checks.
Ooh, all right, here we go. That's 1 success, 1 failure.
Okay. These 2 bipedal mecha with cycloptic eyes are hopping through the tree lines. They look like trash, just barrels and mecha pieces, and one of them is like a chassis of like a Civic. And it's just like, but they're spitting these beams, and one of them tags you for 2 damage.
Okay, cool. I'll take that straight to my hit points here because I want to save my armor a little bit.
Yeah, and these things are just leaping. You can see them leaping about as far as you can move quickly. Like if you were to move entirely, they're just like, thoom, thoom. They're just hopping around you now.
Right. Okay. So I'm sort of like I get hit with these projectiles, and I sort of stumble a little bit, but I come back up and I don't miss a beat, and I'm going to throw my axe again, this time kind of sideways, just like a frisbee, and try and hit one of these things as it comes down on one of its jumps. Oh, that's a failure. So, and it just kind of, I misjudge the trajectory of this thing, and the axe either goes under it or over it, and then I pull it back. I'm also going to use a use action to use my Nano Shroud module as my second action here.
Awesome.
I get to roll a d4 and regain some armor points.
Killer.
So I get 2 armor points back. That's great. So I'm sort of standing there with the axe as it comes back to my hand, and the wound in my shoulder from the bayonet that slipped past my shield just is kind of like slowly like knitting together with this sort of soft blue glow as these nanobots are sort of stitching it back together. And I'm sort of in the cockpit, sweat pouring down my face. I've got the yoke just gripped in my hand, and I sort of look down at the status of my mech down on the HUD, and I sort of make a mental note to let them know that, like, yeah, Nano Shroud works pretty good.
And as your axe is flying through the air just a moment ago, this particular salvager jump pod is a great pilot, and it literally jumps off of your axe and flies toward you as these rocket boosters sort of kick on. And as your Nano Shroud is sealing up your shoulder, this thing just fires off these rockets at you. Just, it's like one of those little, like, so give me a mobility check.
All right. Success.
All right. So the rockets sort of all, as this thing is going, its trajectory, just all the rockets, except for one, which hits your shield and sort of just is a dud. It lands on the ground unexploded.
Perfect. Okay. You said there was 2, right?
There are 2 of them, yeah, and they're just hopping around, just popping off shots like a scant rocket here and there.
Okay. When they're hopping around, are they like at near range to me? They're not getting into melee range with me.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's frenetic. It's frantic. Why don't you give me whatever check you think makes sense if you want to try to grab one of these things out of the sky?
Yeah, I was gonna say I want to try and make an unarmed attack here to basically sort of like grab one of their legs and sort of try to slam it onto the ground.
Absolutely. You give me whatever check you think makes sense for that.
Okay, cool. Probably power, I would imagine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Woo. Success, barely. I keep rolling like within 1 and 2 of my scores here.
I love that.
So this thing is sort of hopping towards me, and I'm actually like, I'm in the cockpit, and I'm sort of like very quickly like putting my sensors, like putting all of my processor power into like, hey, figure out the path of these things, figure out their trajectory, and start trying to like see it before it happens. And so on the HUD, there's like this dotted line showing where it thinks the pod is going to land. And I sort of aim for that, and I reach out and I grab one of these things by its flimsy leg, and I just go and just slam it onto the ground. And the trees nearby just shake and drop all of these needles from this massive mechanical thing being slammed onto the ground. So my unarmed will be a D6, and that'll do 5 damage.
What I will allow you to do is roll that damage again because of the trajectory. You're actually using the momentum of this thing jumping. So you're kind of like, whew. So I'll let you roll that damage again.
Well, all the good it did me. I rolled a 1, so that'll be 7 total damage.
7 total. So as this thing smashes, it's still barely functional. Just but the pilot inside, ears ringing, rattled, probably scrambling. I don't imagine that the salvager cockpits have any sort of like klaxons or anything, but this guy or girl is definitely, blood down the front of the face, looking really banged up.
I'd like to attack again, rolling my reactor die to do so. I'm going to try and finish this thing off.
Absolutely.
Cool. Using my axe, which will be a D8 damage. Oh, man. Okay. Yep. That's a failure. So I imagine that I swing down with my axe and I just sort of catch one of these things' legs and maybe hew the leg off, but it's still operational, just kind of crawling along the ground.
Yep. And as you do that, that sort of, you're close enough so that the front of your cockpit is looking into this patchwork cockpit. It's, like I said, it's literally like a welded together sunroof of a car at this point.
Yeah.
And you see the eyes go wide and you see their thumb push a button. I want you to give me a mobility check.
Oh boy. By the way, I rolled my reactor die for that double attack, and my reactor die did downgrade. I rolled a 1.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah, so like my mech starts venting heat. It's just like venting this steam out of the side. That's a success on the mobility check. We're the 12.
So as the heat of your reactor is boiling beneath you, you're able to shield yourself from this self-destruct mechanism. It's a small pop considering the size that you are, but it definitely was right next to your cockpit. So it's like, and the one that was off to the tree line sort of just begins to hop away.
Okay, yeah. I sort of step through the wreckage, the smoking wreckage of this this salvager sort of jump pod, and I'll try and hit the escaping one with my throwing axe as it runs. I probably won't be able to take it out, but I at least want to make it inoperable as it sort of hops away here. That's a success. 1 damage though. So I glance it with this thing and then yank the axe back into my hand.
Perfect. And as it disappears into the tree line, out of the corner of your eye, you see that sort of barrel. Beep, 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 beep. And this is one of the things salvagers do. They're trying to mess up your systems. They're trying to block your comms. It's one of their guerrilla tactics, and so that thing's still beep, 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 beep.
I'll sort of walk up and just step on it with my mech. Just crush it with the weight of my mech.
And it pops. And it's like turning your phone off of airplane mode. It takes like a second for everything to sort of start.
I get like 15 texts that all came in while I was on the plane.
They do that thing where they go.
Yeah. Bloom, 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 bloom.
And up in the top of your cockpit there's a particular light that's flashing. And that basically just means that you have one recorded message. And it says, call sign Oracle Jigsaw. So basically when the comms are out, there's some sort of a system so that you will still get the messages in some cases when you guys go through dead zones and things like that.
Right. Okay, cool. So I will, I'll let everything sort of populate, and I will just do a quick scan of the area as my radar comes back on, make sure that there's no one coming towards me that I can see. And then I'll thumb that message and listen to it.
Cool. Yeah. And, it starts off, with sort of her laugh, and that sound of maybe the birds and things that you experienced when you opened up your cockpit for that 5 minutes. And then the message quickly descends into, it's here. Oh my God, it's here. If you could hear me, Prophet. Oh God! If anyone can hear this, I'm at coordinates Alpha Zeta 229 near the... Ah! Ah! And you just hear oh my God, it's... And the transmission stops.
And I would look to that image that I still have pinned to my HUD, that the Annihilator. Shit. And I would open the comms and say, Rufus, do you read? It's Prophet Mammoth. Do you read me?
There is no response.
Okay. I will pull up the whatever the most recent like satellite map of the area is, and see if because I linked my transponder with Oracle's so we could kind of keep track of each other. I'd like to see if I can like see if her transponder is still active or if it's just if she's not even on the map anymore.
Sure. Yeah, her transponder is active. You know, the way that the map's laid out, it's sort of a grid, you know, numbers and letters and things like that. And her transponder's pinging near Alpha Zeta 229, which is this area of oil fields and these huge oil rigs and things like that. And so you can see her pinging at least, you know, within the last 10 minutes or so, it's still pinging there. It's not a live feed, but it's definitely there.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, if I can try to do this, is I'm going to record a message and have it just loop on the comms automatically, just in case anyone's listening. And the message will basically say, this is Mecha Unit Prophet Mammoth of the fireteam Crimson Meteors. I am proceeding to Alpha Zeta, whatever the coordinates were. It appears that Mecha Unit Oracle is down. We'll proceed to these coordinates to investigate. We'll check in after. And I basically just want that to loop in case the message is able to get back to Rufus or any other mecha units in the area. And then what I also like to do before I set out here is I have a boost kit, the consumable I was allowed to have. I'm going to go ahead and use that. So my mech reaches back sort of behind it and it pulls out this sort of like it's like a weird like metal half sphere thing. And I sort of like put it on my chest and it sort of starts expanding. And it's sort of like that same blue glow that came from the nano shroud happens. And the blue glow sort of like overtakes and the metal begins kind of stitching together a little bit. And the metal there is like shiny and new, whereas the rest of the metal on the mech is all sort of buffed and marred and scarred up and stuff. So there's like fresh steel that is sort of being built by these nanobots, and heat begins sort of venting out the sides, these like heat vents in the torso of this thing. So I get to regain 1d4 armor points, and I upgrade my reactor die by 1 step.
Killer. Very cool.
So I get 3 armor points back, which puts me back up at maximum for my armor points, and then back up to my d6 reactor die. And then once the boost kit has done its good work, I will begin heading towards those coordinates. Definitely a little bit more sheepish than I was when I approached the scavengers. I'm like keeping an eye out. I've got my sensors on, maybe even moving from cover to cover if possible, you know, trying to keep a good amount of cover between myself and whatever might be out here.
Yeah. And there is lots of cover as far as small sort of steps and cliffs and mountain formations. There's a lot of leeway, and basically the deeper you go toward these coordinates near this oil field, you remember that the oil field is just surrounded by these different hills and cliffs and mountains. So it's sort of all roads lead there as long as you head following the coordinates. But there's plenty of cover. It's a lot like a labyrinth in a way, where you can skitter from side to side. You could change directions pretty easily as long as you remember where you are, that sort of thing.
Okay, cool.
And you can't help but think about what got you here in the first place. I mean, of all the Crimson Meteors, your particular fire team has been tasked with guarding possibly humanity's only hope. And you think about the last mission you were on, led by Viking Eon. You remember that battle. What's going through your mind as you think about this feeling that you've had once before?
I just remember how every battle seems like the last one. Every battle seems like the most important one. It seems like this is the tide turner right here. And that battle, probably a few months back at this point, when Viking Eon made the call to leave our point that we were ordered to defend, flank around the side and attack these monsters from behind. That decision won that battle, but it had such a heavy cost. And as I'm moving towards this new foe, I can't help but think that all of the costs that have been paid today and yesterday and all the days before, maybe they have all been in vain, because maybe this thing is inevitable.
Maybe you were there when Tanker Horizon was killed in that maneuver. Maybe you weren't. But you remember what the recon photos looked like. You remember how sterile and clinical the battlefield looked in those photos, in those digital hologram screens and in file folders on the desks of military leaders. And you remember that none of those images, none of those pictures, none of that could capture the loss that the Crimson Meteors felt in that victory.
Yeah, I think I didn't even realize that Tanker Horizon was dead until after the battle was over, because it was so desperate and so pitched, and even the fire team got separated and we were fighting on multiple fronts. And as the battle wind down and we regrouped and Viking called for us for a status update, there was just static when she called for Viking, or for tankers. And it has haunted me that Tanker died alone, that Tanker didn't have his fire team with him when it happened. And it kills me to think that maybe Oracle died alone too. She was out there all by herself. And so thinking about that, I might even push the throttle a little bit more and try and get there a little quicker.
And you do. And you, through the labyrinthine cliffs and hills, these brown, grass-covered edifices, you can start to see the oil fields, and they're massive, they're long, they sprawl. And then you see a plume of smoke. And as you enter into this, the opening here where the oil field is, you just see something that your brain can't even reconcile at first. The Annihilator. The thing you saw from afar, the thing that you dreaded, is actually in pieces. It's flayed. It's been ripped apart, stabbed. It's acidic blood. This red, roiling acidic blood is mixing in with the oil fields, and your brain can't recognize what's happening here. This thing you dreaded has been ripped apart by someone or something. And the oil is just, these pistons are pumping, and the oil is pushing. And this thing that you feared is dead at your feet and scattered about.
What the hell? And honestly, seeing it dead probably unsettles me more than if I came over this hill and it was sitting there alive waiting for me to kill me. And I look at these scattered pieces and these limbs that are probably still twitching. And I open up the comms and I say, "This is Mecha Unit Prophet Mammoth of the Crimson Meteors. This is a call to any nearby mecha units to close in on my transponder. Is there anyone reading?"
Sort of scattered, strange grumblings, mumblings, and then this static over your comms.
I would click the comms off, wipe sweat from my brow, and I will move over to the biggest piece of the Annihilator that I can find, and I'm going to start scanning, trying to see what killed this thing. I want to know if it was weapons fire, if it was another beast from the wound, if it was something else entirely. I want to try and figure out what happened here.
Sure. The largest piece of it is its midsection. What would be a carapace or thorax, something like that on this twisted thing. And I mean, you've seen enough combat. This thing looks like, well, maybe you've even done something like this yourself. But it looks like what would happen if a mecha that was big enough and strong enough stuck its hands in the center and ripped it in half.
I don't think any mech exists that would have the reactor capacity, the energy output in order to rip something this size in half. And so I'm not quite sure what to make of that. And I think my mech would even maybe nudge this corpse with a giant foot, kind of inspecting it a little closer.
And as you do so, and as you sort of tap it, you can see that a piece falls off of it that was clearly a clean cut. Like a butcher might trim a fillet. So while this one piece is torn and just ripped up into ribbons by what look like, enormous hands, there are other pieces of this thing that look cloven cleanly. It's sort of a strange dichotomy.
I sort of look again to that image on my screen of the Annihilator, and I'll actually sort of dismiss it. I just sort of throw it off the screen, and it blips away. And I would sit back in the seat in my cockpit and just... All right. It's just you. No comms. Whatever killed this thing can't be that far away. And hopefully it's on our side. Oracle was here. And I'm going to start scanning for Oracle's transponder or any sort of energy signature from her reactor, trying to zero in on where she might be.
Sure. Give me a presence check.
Ugh. Failure. 11, and my presence is 11.
Okay. As you sort of start to scan, you're using different pieces of your mecha, you're using your systems, and even though your comms aren't on, they jump to life. And all of the lights in your mecha just sort of surge to life, just like very quickly, like all of the lights on the LED at once. And you just hear this like, and then they shut back down, and I want you to roll your reactor die.
Ooh, buddy. Whew, success with a 3.
Your mecha cools. And there's twitching up ahead. This must be the Annihilator's head. And it's lopsided end over end, but it's twitching and it's moving.
I will bring out I sort of reach back, and the axe sort of magnetically connects to my back, and I pull out the shotgun, and it unfolds, and I will move forward towards that twitching, keeping the gun sort of trained on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I want you to do as you're sort of moving forward here is give me a mobility check, because this ground is basically becoming acidic, Annihilator blood, and oil mixture, and it's becoming this sort of awful quicksand.
I imagine it looking like, have you ever seen someone like cook the liquid out of Coke and it turns into like this like horrible viscous like tar? That's how I imagine it looking, and it's like fizzing.
Yes, that's exactly what it looks like. And it's starting to get a little worse, as though this chemical reaction is reaching critical mass.
Okay. So I got a 6 on my mobility test, which is a success.
Perfect. The only thing that you feel is that sort of, if you've ever had your foot stuck in mud and you didn't realize it, just the very bottom of your sole of your foot, where it's sort of like half a second longer than normal. So you go to move and you do, but you stick just a second, and then you move over there. The Annihilator's head is missing a large piece of it, but that jaw you described with the tusks and that sort of enormous mouth has something clenched inside of it, and it's sort of wiggling. Even though the Annihilator itself is dead, its jaw is locked closed, and there's something inside of it.
So I sort of give the surroundings like a cursory sort of scan, and then the shotgun goes back to being magnetically attached to the mecha's hip, and I will reach down and try and pry the mouth open.
Give me a power test.
Success.
Describe to me what it looks like as you rip this thing's jaw open.
So I start with just the hands of my mech, and I get in between the teeth, and I start prying it open. And and the pistons in the arms kind of start to protest a little bit, and I hear the servos really working. And so I sort of, as I get it a little bit open, I wedge a foot in there and brace the bottom mandible with a foot, and then lift up with both arms, and I basically just break the mandible of this thing and rip it open.
The tusk snaps like chalk under your enormous foot as you do so. Just and inside of this thing's mouth is an odd shape at first. You're sort of looking and you make it, and it registers in your mind. This is a mecha's arm. And then based on the markings, based on what you know, this is very likely the arm of the mecha Oracle Jigsaw.
Okay. So I sort of pull the arm out and kick the head away from me. Does it look like this arm was ripped from the body of the mecha?
Yes, it looks as though, and you can tell that from the frayed wiring and the sort of the pattern with which the shoulder joint is sort of just splayed.
Okay.
And it continues to switch. It just twitches every once in a while.
The rest of you's got to be somewhere. I'll continue sort of scanning for more pieces, trying to zero in on any sort of energy signature that I might be able to. And maybe I can even use this arm. Maybe I can clue into the distinct energy signature of Oracle and try and zero in on it.
Sure. I want you to do a couple of things. First,
okay.
I want you to give me a system check.
Ugh, failure.
Okay. So upon failing the system check, you just feel a ringing in the back of your mind. Sort of just this. Maybe it's the mecha, maybe it's you, maybe it's how hot it is in here. But in that, you are able to piece together. And I think you finally have your bearings, getting the lay of this, what was a battlefield. And you can see these strange, large tracks leading in one direction of the oil field. And then you can see that there are patterns and pieces of what look like maybe oil miners, different things that are sort of a little older. So there's a fresh set of tracks that goes off in one direction. And before you realize what's happening, yellow, orange, glowing, fire. The sparks from Oracle Jigsaw's arm have caught this oil field, this caustic acid oil field on fire. And you are surrounded by flames. And it doesn't look like you have a clear path out.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to try and I just like bring up my shield in front of me, and I'm going to try and just charge through these flames as quickly as possible in the direction of those tracks.
Sure. Okay. I'll let you essentially choose. What we're going to do is a sort of skill challenge here using this system.
Okay.
Where you can just narrate to me what you're doing specifically to get through the wall of flame. And you said charge through. Are you going to muscle up? Are you going to try to run fast? How do you want to do this?
I think I would probably try and firstly just rely on the armor of my mech. Basically just trying to muscle my way through it, bringing up my shield and hinging on that. So maybe the first roll would be a power, just muscling through these flames.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Success barely on power.
Okay. All right. And even in the wake of success, essentially treating this fire like, or these checks are almost like saving throws, where you're going to still take a little bit of damage depending even if you save.
That makes sense.
So you take 2 damage in the wake of that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Now give me a mobility check to see if your feet are stuck.
Ooh, that's a 2. Nice success.
All right. So yeah, you're moving heavily enough that I feel like you're just smashing any sort of suction. Just
Killer. Okay, cool.
So what you're going to do is you're going to need to give me a certain number of successes to escape the fire.
Okay, cool. Let me roll again.
Yep.
That's 2 successes.
Okay. So describe to me what it looks like as you are powering through this fire, but it is still hurting you. This is 3 more hit points of damage as the flames lick against you.
Man, okay, cool. So I think I'm sort of just, I know that I don't have the mobility to try and dodge these flames. And so I'm just trying to get out before they get hot enough to, start really damaging my mech.
Sure.
And so I'm charging through, shield up, sort of protecting the cockpit. And I'm occasionally laying on these jump jets that I have that I use to close the distance between me and enemies. And I'm sort of like doing these little jumps,
Sure.
like over the big flames and stuff, coming back down and still running.
That's perfect. So you're nearing the end here. You can see a sort of end to where it looks like the oil is sort of meeting the mud, and that caustic blood is not really seeping there. And so you can sort of see the exit in a few different directions. What are you going to do? What's your final test going to be?
I think I'm going to go for a mobility test, and I'm going to try and push my jump jets and basically leap to the end, do a little hop, basically, and try and leap over the last of these flames. Whew. Barely a success. Man, 16. My mobility is 17.
Oh, buddy.
Whew.
And I just threw my D4 over my dice tower across the room.
I hate D4s.
I was like, wait, that didn't make a sound. Oh,
that's 0. That means I take 0 damage.
You actually take 4.
Oh, God. No.
Yeah, sorry. I can see where the other one's laying.
Man.
No, I can't.
Not looking great for old Prophet Mammoth.
But you emerge from those flames, and it's sort of the air that is around your movement just pushes the flames, and a plume of smoke rises behind you. And you just stand. And
yeah,
as
and there's a
roar
million claxons going off in my pocket. Beep, 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 beep. It's like heat warning. And I'm just like, oh, I know.
And every part of you on that chart is red.
Yeah.
Just like, and just imagine as you sort of charge out of this and the flames wash off of you, you're now smoldering. There's haze from the heat of your armor as you're sort of walking away from this fire. And in the foreground is this just Crimson Meteor, Prophet Mammoth, and your shield. And in the background, you just see the Annihilator's skull being engulfed in flames and blackening. And you see the remains of that mecha arm just sort of, withering away to nothing.
And as I'm slow motion walking away from this scene, I sort of my mech reaches back and that axe shoots off of my back and I catch it in my hand. And I do kind of like a cool, twirl move with it and keep going forward. And then I turn on the comms and I go, all right, guys, I got the grill going. Get the brats out. I don't really
and
say
Rufus replies with, I got nothing but brats.
Throw them on there. If you threw meat on my mech, it would sear real nicely.
Oh, dude, yeah. I could get a real good grill mark on your vents.
Dude, and it's like the steel of this thing is like a nicely seasoned cast iron pan. Like it's been in the family for half a century. Dude. You cook a lot of bacon in there.
There's a pilot who sits on top of the shoulder of his mecha just cooking something over the heat vent.
I think there's this anime I watched. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like there's a mech in it, and it's like water world, but there's mechs, and there's a scene where it's like he's on the deck of this big ship and he's cooking like bacon and eggs on the foot of his mech because it's that hot. Like there's just heat coming down, and it's like
perfect.
And he's like sitting there like poking at these eggs like as they're cooking on the foot of his mech.
That's so good. And then what they don't tell you is that he dies just from germs.
He's like, mercury poisoning. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought that I got bubble guts for a week?
Don't cook eggs on your mech. That's rule number 1 at mech school.
At mech school. And so in front of you, in front of Prophet Mammoth, are these tracks that seem to go in a few different directions. But they're really large and strange. But it looks as though whatever made these tracks maybe circled back, maybe came back, went in a few different directions. And so the clearest there's 2 very divergent paths. One leads to the east, and the other leads sort of to the west. And these footprints are going in totally different directions, but they do appear to be made by the same strange creature.
Yeah, I was going to ask if they appear to be made by the same thing. Is there any way I could utilize my sensors here to try and see which set of tracks is like the most recent?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
give me a roll. Give me a systems roll.
Okay. Saint my strong suit. Whoo! 7 under 9, baby.
Yeah. So the ones going to the west seem the most fresh.
Okay.
And I imagine your sensors are sort of like sort of doing the Terminator, matching clothes thing where it's like, and they're just testing the depth. So like the natural rise of the soil is just millimeters lower than on the eastern than the western tracks.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'll start bearing west then.
Okay. As you do so, every once in a while there's a strange surge. Sort of weird power surges. You feel your core get a little warmer, sort of lurch, grind a little bit every once in a while. Just grim portents, indeed. And as you crest a set of hills, you can see the fortress that you were actually going to. From the pictures and from the different things that Rufus shared with you, you're like, okay, cool. This is where I was supposed to go to guard and then transport this new experimental mecha. And so the thing is, even from this distance, you can see that there are fires burning and there's smoke pouring out of it.
Do I detect any movement in that fortress from what I can see? I'll take a couple minutes if I have a good vantage point and just kind of watch and have my sensors on full, try to see if there's anything moving inside this fortress.
Sure. And you do. You have quite a good vantage point. At this point, you're looking distant, maybe distant plus, like you're pretty far out there.
Okay.
But even zooming in with your cameras, you can see what would probably to you just look like bugs, but they're people. And you can see they're people screaming and running sort of from far away. And then you see a large object. I'll put it this way. The fortress itself is built into a mountain. And so imagine that both sides of the fortress are stone, crag, this beautiful brown rock. And then the center are these enormous bay doors. And it's steel and man-made. And it's this marriage of, the technology that has been built into this mountain and nature itself. The doors look as though they've been wrenched completely open. They're bent. The smoke is pouring out of that. The people are scurrying from there. And as you can kind of see, an object spinning end over end comes out of those two huge doors. And you see that it is a mecha head. Mecha that you don't recognize, but it is a mecha's head. And it sort of flips end over end, hits the ground, and then comes to a grinding halt. And so there's activity, there's action, there's things happening inside that base.
I am looking at my HUD, and I'm looking at the integrity of my armor and the fact that I have multiple damage systems. I do a quick status report, and I see, that the servos in my left arm are failing, that the armor in the back is pretty much non-existent at this point, that my sensors are under a lot of strain, that my reactor is running hot. And I think about a conversation that I had with Tanker. We were trying to decide if we wanted to help out this other squad that was asking for assistance. We were battered. We were beaten. Our mechs were out of ammunition. Reactors down to nothing. And I told him, these mecha are worth everything. These mecha are what we use to win this war. The more mecha we have, the better chance we have at fighting. And Tanker told me, if we don't go and help those people, what's the use of having these mechs? And I sort of looked down at my HUD, at these red blinking lights, at the readout with all of this damage. And then I look back at this fortress and I see these people running. And I reach up and I push the throttle forward and I start moving towards this fortress.
And as you grind towards this sardine can that's been opened up in the side of a rock, your HUD sort of flashes to life. It's an automatic thing. They upload these different coordinates and things, and it says, now approaching New Roanoke. And so this fortress, New Roanoke, as you get closer and closer, you see one large hand grip the door, and then another large hand grip the door. And then you see these doors come down like paper. And I want you to give me a mobility check as they both come flying at you. These enormous, these titanic doors.
Critical success. I rolled a 1.
Describe what it looks like as you dodge the largest thing that's ever been thrown at you twice.
So the first one comes at me, and I duck underneath it, and the second one flies at me. I hit the jump jets and I run across it as it's flying toward me. I just cring, cring, cring. I run across this door and then leap off of it.
Yeah, and as you do so, as you're leaping, you see a mecha unlike anything you've ever seen before. And as this thing rears its head out of these doors, its movement is unnatural. You've been a pilot for a long time, and this thing is not moving the way it should. There's an uncanny valley element to it. This enormous mecha pushes through the wreckage of the doors and begins to trudge toward you. And then the trudge becomes a full-out gallop, and then it becomes a full-out run, and then the boosters blast toward you. And I want you to roll initiative.
Dope. That's a success.
Okay? I think you're going to go first.
So this thing is coming towards me, and when I first saw it, my first instinct was to click on my comms. And so when it stepped out of the doors and I just took in this thing, I would click on the comms and say, "This is Mecha Unit Prophet Mammoth, broadcasting to unknown mech. Please stand down. I order you to stand." Okay, he's not standing down. And as it sort of like boosts towards me, I would reach back, and again, that axe would come to my hand. I would bring up my arm, and the shield would go, would sort of unfurl from my arm. And I would sort of like, as it comes toward me, I'm going to try and clothesline it with my axe. Like I just like bear down, spread my mech's legs, like get into a low crouch and just try and like slam into this thing with my axe, trying to use its own momentum to like slice into it with this thing.
Absolutely. And so roll for me.
That's going to be a success with 7 damage, and I'm gonna do I want to burn armor right now? Probably not. I'm not gonna burn armor. I'm just gonna do 7 damage. So I just like slam into this thing. And then as a second action, I'd like to use my nano shroud and regain some armor here because I'm pretty low. It's gonna be 3 armor, which will almost put me back up to full. And I need to roll my reactor die for using the nano shroud. I'm good with a 4. That's my turn.
I want you to give me a presence roll.
Oh boy. Oof, failure.
You don't know what to do. After that, this act of ace piloting that you just did, and what it causes is to come face to face with this thing. And now that you're up close, you realize exactly what you're looking at, and there are no two ways about it. You're looking at the remains of Tanker Horizon. Cobbled, patched, woven through, and placed like armor onto a living wound. In the center of this patchwork creature that is half Tanker Horizon and half your sworn enemy is the cockpit that you know oh so well. And sitting at the center of this thing, piloting it, is your commanding officer, Viking Eon. And as you flip on the comms, you just hear, and through it, just for a moment, just for half of a second, you hear Viking Eon's voice. And she says, "I'm sorry. I thought we could control them. I thought we could kill me. You must destroy Paragon Crown." This thing rears back, and with its barbed tail, just swipes at you. And in it, there are it's those shards of glass pressed through, sticking out of the other side. There's these pieces of metal, titanium, and it just, I need you to give me a mobility roll.
Boy. Success with a 4.
All right. I want you to describe to me what it looks like as you stop this thing's enormous tail, because that's the only way you're going to keep it from hurting you.
As it is whipped towards me, I'm reeling from this realization of what is before me. And I have these images flash through my mind of Tanker and I standing back to back shooting as, you know, these monsters, these creatures of the wound are closing in around us. Countless missions together. And now his mech turned into this abomination, piloted by my commanding officer, his sister. And she's asking me to end this. and I almost don't catch the tail as it comes from above. But I bring up the shield and I feel the tail slam into the shield, and I just sort of move it and like wrench the tail away from me using that shield arm.
And as you're holding this thing and wrenching it away, you're being slid through this huge field, this just rocky, and this thing's head, which is the helmet of a mech, sort of has this jaw that bursts open and tries to bite you in the center of where your reactor would be. This thing is literally trying to bite and eat a piece of your reactor, and I need you to roll your presence die, and then your reactor die.
Oh boy. So failure on the presence check. Reactor die. Whew. 3. I'm good.
Okay. So as this thing chomps into you, oh my, I'm so sorry. That is 6 damage.
Okay.
How you looking?
I'm gonna burn 4 points of armor. I'm not looking good. I will tell you this: if I was not level 3, I would have been dead about an hour and a half ago. So I got some extra hit points that are padding it quite nicely, but it's not looking great. There are just sparks, just like it's Star Trek: The Next Generation inside this cockpit. Like I'm just rocking around and there's just sparks flying. There's like extras behind me going, ah! Like I don't even know what they're doing in here, but they're flying all over the place. It's not looking good.
Your comms flicker to life. But then something breaks through. This is Oracle. Stand still. And you just hear. And this huge cylindrical metal object lands distant from you. Just. She goes, My mecha, gone, obliterated. The arm, it got me here. I'm inside the base with the refugees. I'm guarding it as best I can. That might be able to help you. And it looks like she shot you some sort of payload out there, but it's pretty far away, and it's going to be difficult to get to it, especially embroiled in this combat.
Okay.
It's now your turn.
So I have my shield up, and I'm just bracing it against this thing's bulk. I imagine that, Tanker Heavy was a Titan mech, so he's already bigger than mine, and then just, used as armor plating on this thing. It's probably, half again as big as I am, and it's just bearing down on me. And like you said, like I'm getting basically pushed across this rocky field, kicking up rubble behind me. And I sort of see this payload just drop down, and I say, "Good to hear your voice, Oracle. I can use all the help I need." And I would reach up, push that throttle, and there's a red hot glow that emanates from the boosters on the back of my mech. And I start pushing back as I slowly start sliding forward from the power of the boosters, and I start pushing this abomination back. And then I'm going to break free with my shield, and I would like to make an attack and then try and blow past this thing and make a movement here.
Sure.
So the attack is going to be barely a success with 2 damage.
Okay.
And I'm going to go ahead and burn some armor and roll my damage again using my reckless attack because I'm being reckless. Whew.
Sure.
So that's 6 extra damage. So 8 total damage that turn. So I imagine that the recklessness of that attack is me basically breaking through with my shield and leaving myself totally exposed and open, but then following it up with that axe and just driving it right into this thing's chest and ripping it out, and pieces of flesh and circuitry come with my axe. And then I basically shoulder check this thing and start running past it towards this payload.
Would you say that it's fair that I'd get an opportunity attack?
Absolutely.
Okay. So as you shoulder past this thing, it's jarred back, and you can clearly see the payload in front of you, and so can it. And not being a mindless creature, not like the ones that you fought before, but having a cunning, this thing actually turns and targets the payload. And if you don't think that's too unfair, I was going to use the opportunity attack to try to shoot the crate you're going after.
Sure. Yeah.
Miss. So it just kind of like, and I'm not even sure exactly the patchwork sort of strange arm cannon this thing's using to make, but it misses, and this enormous crater just gets blown into the ground.
And I'm just like pushing these boosters to their limits. And I'm like half running, half floating as these boosters are carrying me forward and up. And I'm like, and any obstacles that come in my way, I'm just leaping over. Like I'm basically running like Hulk in the original Hulk movie when he's escaping from the thing where it's just like run, jump, run, jump. And I'm just booking it towards this payload.
Dude, yeah, and you are right upon it. Just it's as you get to it, you probably even have to like slide and like catch it in your arm. You're going so fast past it, like
yeah, I overdo it a little bit and have to kind of grab it as I'm sliding past. I'm like Tokyo drifting around this thing. So
yeah, so you are in possession of this thing now. It has you. Or sorry, you have it.
It has me too. What can I tell what it is?
Sure, yeah. So you pop this thing open, and it's a bunch of brats from Rufus.
And I go, there's a moment of silence, and then I look up at the HUD and I go, that son of a, and then I just explode because this thing blows me up.
And as fast as it could, it says the end. And then it goes black.
The end. Paid for by the Brat Council.
This is actually an experimental weapon that is used, has been under research. This is something called a one-shot module. And so basically this module allows you to recreate the effects of any one module of your choice that requires an action. And so you and I get to choose the module when you acquire the item. So what is this thing dialed into right now?
I'm going to say... Chest beam would be cool. Yeah, let's do chest beam.
Killer.
So I like pull this thing out of the payload and I see what it is. And I just sort of like put it on my chest and it sort of attaches itself and starts like spinning like a turbine on my chest. And
That's so amazing.
I go, that'll work.
Use it well. You only get one. Oh, I have to go. And then she's sort of gone off the comms, and like they sort of power down, and then that sort of takes over again. And just for a moment, it's almost like you hear tanker. But it's different. It's wrong. It's strange. Give me a presence check.
Oof, hard failure.
You left me there, didn't you? You left me there to die. You and my sister. You know, I thought we were more than just... I thought we were more. You know, there's Crimson Meteors, and then there was us. And you hid. You ran and you hid. And I died. And you're going to die now because you're a coward. And what I want you to do is actually there's not necessarily an effect other than I think you're extremely rattled.
Yeah, I think hearing his voice again and voicing the guilt that I've already had myself, my hand is shaking on the yoke right now. It's definitely not as firm as it was.
Yeah. I want you to give me a mobility check at disadvantage.
Oh boy. Oh, okay. I got a 10 and I got a 16. My mobility is 17. That's 2 successes.
Oh, wow.
My mobility is high, man.
Well, you see that this thing tries to grab you and lift you up. But you're just too heavy. You're heavier than it expected. And so it goes to pick you up and rear you over its head, but it sort of can't. And so both you and this wound creature topple to the ground, and you're both rolling around on the ground now, just trading blows and just doing as much damage as you can to like rocket elbows and all that stuff. And you're rolling around as this thing tries to lift you and can't.
Those words that Tanker said are echoing in my head. You hid, you ran, you let me die. Now it's your turn to die. I'm sort of like, I'm just shaking my head. I'm closing my eyes. I'm barely defending against this thing. It's just pummeling me with its fists. And then it gets me on the ground and it gets on top of me and it has all of its weight on me. And there's a million, I can hear the mech straining. I can hear pieces breaking. I can hear wires coming loose, sparks. I actually see the screen crack on my HUD as the weight presses in on the cockpit and the cockpit starts becoming compressed around me. As the cockpit is closing in, there's just this silence, sparks in slow motion flying behind me. There's heat venting up in my face. And I sort of look up, and through the HUD, I see the helmet of this thing, and it's reeling back to punch me again. And I rip the cons off my head, and I just throw the headset aside, and I go, Tanker died protecting us. And the chest beam, and I'm going to fire it at this thing. So I test power. Oh, every roll is like, man, it was close, buddy. So 6 damage, and I can push this thing away from me to a near distance. So what that looks like is this thing it's reeling back to punch probably into the cockpit and kill me. And I trigger this one shot module, and this beam of pure, just crackling energy just shoots out and hurls this creature off of me, and it goes flying, rolling into a smoldering heap, like dozens of meters away from me. And I like shakily stand up, one arm like Gohan style, broken, oil just leaking out of it, and I'm holding my axe.
And as that light begins to light up from your chest beam, and you're essentially cockpit to cockpit with this thing at this point. And the light is a dim orange glow on the inside. And all you see inside this cockpit that is so familiar is your commanding officer, Viking Eon. And she's sort of lashed up by these strange eldritch tentacles. And you see her eyes are rolled back in the back of her head. And there's all these different slimy constructs in the cockpit that are sort of controlling her. And you see as this light begins to sort of light up her hair, as the heat pushes through the glass and starts to make the beginning of the beam, she comes to just for a moment, and her eyes open, and it's her for just a second, and you're face to face as the glass is touching. And with as much humanity as she can muster, she puts her hand on the glass. And she doesn't say it into the comm, but you're close enough to see her mouth, "Thank you." And then you see her disappear into a beam of white as this abomination is thrown from you and tumbles, and as you stand hulking.
Dude, dank. That's so awesome.
It's melting and burned, and pieces of it are melting off, so that the mecha now is just singed and scorched, and there's nothing left but wound. And this thing is broken. It's racked and ruined. And then it sort of snaps through, and it stands up with a strong arched back, and bone protrusions bust through what is left of the mecha as it starts ripping it off. Its maw opens from its jaw down to about the middle of its chest. And this wound lets out a roar, just this. And with the last of its power, the last of its ability, it charges you. I want you to roll mobility.
I failed. That's a 17 exactly.
So, with everything left, with this scorched, melted cockpit fused to its chest, this thing runs up, and just like it destroyed Annihilator, it puts its hands into your shoulders, and it starts pulling and pulling and pulling. And with a strange interior of your cockpit sort of jarring, your entire left arm is ripped from you. And then this thing proceeds to use it to smash you over and over again. You take 8 points of damage. And you don't have your left arm anymore. This thing's holding it and just beating you with it.
So I am disabled. 0 hit points as this thing pummels me, rips the arm off. I sink to the ground to one knee, barely holding onto this axe, and my mech's head sort of lulls as all the systems in my cockpit shut down. I'm desperately trying to reroute power to try to get a little bit more out of my reactor as the glass of the HUD shatters and pieces of glass are slicing into my face as this thing just continues to pummel me.
And it doesn't stop. It continues over and over and over again. And it's your turn.
So zero armor, 0 hit points. I'm in the cockpit. The cockpit is crunching around me. These support beams are bending inward. Blood streaming from wounds in my face and from my nose. One eye is swollen shut from banging into the side of the cockpit. I try and push a little bit more power here to get to the comms. I grab the headset that I turned aside and I press it to my ear and I say, "Oracle, if you can hear me, I'm down. hope I bought you enough time to get out of there. This thing's hurt. Couple good shots, you might be able to bring it down.
Roger. We're escaping. We're evacuating. You've given us plenty of time, but I don't have anything to shoot it with. It destroyed everything in here. It's Prophet, I don't know what to do. We need to think of something. And this creature just continues to sort of grind and it's slowed down a bit, but it's still just sort of like just taking and ripping plates off and just peeling away pieces and parts. As thick as you are, it's trying to just get in there, and it's just like
I sort of look to my right where there's not even a HUD there anymore. It's just there are holes through the hull of this thing that I can see through. And I see the axe, the throwing axe, like stuck into the ground just at the reach of my mech's arm, my right arm, which is just have sprawled out into the mud. I look down, I see that my legs have been torn from the frame of my mech and tossed to the side. This beast is actually reaching into the lower torso and ripping out cables and pistons like they're entrails, just ripping out the guts of this mech. And Tim, if you'll let me, I'd like to try and use the rerouting power ability of a disabled mech to try and push and do one last thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I'm going to just, from as a game master to you right now, this is all uncharted territory and I don't have a grand plan and I don't know. It's whatever you want to do. This is your life, your pilot. So however you want to do this, man.
Okay. So I say, I got this, Oracle. Go. And I reach down and I'm sort of slamming on the HUD, and this flickering readout, just barely active at my lower right. I press it and I push the reactor power all the way up. And this thing, the HUD barely flickers to life. I grab the yoke. And at the same time, my mech and I move as one. I move the yoke to the right, and the arm of my mech reaches over and grabs the axe stuck into the ground. And I look up at this thing, and if it has eyes, I look into its eyes, and I say, "This is for Tanker and Viking, you son of a bitch." And I bring the axe up, and I'm going to try and basically hook this thing with the axe, like doing some damage, but mostly trying to just make sure it can't get away. I just want to slam this axe into the side of it and hook it in.
Yeah.
And I want to overload my reactor.
Absolutely.
Dope. Okay, cool. So I just put the axe into this thing, and I hold on to it, and I continue pushing that reactor power up and up to the, it's the flash. It's like green, yellow, red. I push it into the red. Whatever klaxons are left are just whirring at me. There's a voice on the comm crackling saying, "Meltdown imminent, meltdown imminent." And I just sort of like lean back and close my eyes as I feel the intense heat of the reactor beginning to melt down and explode.
As the reactor heats, you can't help but think to try to cool it down. It's a reflex at this point. And I'm not sure what the last thing that goes through your mind is. I'm not sure what it feels like. And you're not sure if you're dreaming this or if it's real. but you think for half a second, you see the enormous red hand of a scout mech scoop in to your cockpit and pull you out. And in a blur, you see what you think might be Dagger Zero, your brother in arms. The one that Rufus mentioned was running late. But maybe that was just a dream. And you exploded next to that wound, destroying it, obliterating what's left of this experimental mech, this Paragon Crown. And I'll leave that up to you. That's where we're going to end it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Oh, that was so good. I was at 2 hit points and 2 armor points when you dealt 8 damage to me with that attack, and I was like, down.
That was so fun. Oh my god.
Dude, I'm so glad I got to play this system. It is so fun to like be in a mech and do mech stuff. I feel like it's like an untapped part of my like just my brain, and like just the like Matt Click zeitgeist of like all these like sound effects and phrases and maneuvers and things that I've just been cultivating over a lifetime of watching like Mech Warrior and Gundam and Robotech and stuff. I'm just like, I want to do all this stuff, and it's so cool to be able to utilize that stuff. So thank you, man, for running this game for me, because I've really been wanting to play it.
Dude, you deserve to play it, and I've been wanting to run it. So it was perfect the way that met up. And
yeah,
man, that was a lot of fun. So all right, let's start over. We'll do another one.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Let's try again. I want to load my game, and I'm going to do things a little differently this time.
That's perfect. Okay, so this time you're in South Dakota.
Okay. Oh,
okay.
Well, change the scenery there.
Yeah, a little change of scenery. It's not Paragon. It's like almost Goodagon.
I was legitimately like, oh, what? When you said that the Annihilator was dead already, I was like, I was not expecting that. I was genuinely surprised.
Man, I was hoping so. I was trying to figure out how to really make you afraid. And what I was going for was like the since it was a one-on-one game, I was trying to play off of like eldritch horror kind of and weird, like making it less brutish kaiju and making them more like these crazed, psychotic, like mess with your mind creatures.
Yeah, that was.
And I thought that would be a good way to do it and make you really afraid.
Yeah, it was almost like a Call of Cthulhu like mecha game, because it's like, here's the scene of the crime, like, what happened here? I should investigate, and then but then I also get to be in a giant robot punching things. So totally. I really loved the throwing axe. That was really cool. I just like having a mech that could like throw its axe and then magnetically pull it back is like a really cool thing. Yeah, that was awesome, man. How did it feel to run? Did you enjoy the system running? Because it's all rolls with the player. You don't get to really roll anything aside from damage, and some people don't really care for that. So
no, I actually enjoyed it. It was it's and we've heard some reviewers call it this game isn't rules light, it's rules elegant. Yeah. And I think that's a really good way to describe it, because what it really helped me do as a GM is just focus on narrative and tell you what happens and sort of frame the scene, and then you take care of how you handle it in a very real way, because you're rolling it all. And so what that let me do is just focus. And rolling damage is really fun, but it's more like, all right, you take care of the mechanics, I'll take care of the story. And that's a really interesting division of how it works. So it felt really good.
Well, and it puts the onus of like like almost like describing like avoiding damage and getting hit by damage like on the players, which is cool because there's all kinds of cool stuff you can play with in a mech game of like, oh, I use my boosters to like jump over the attack, or, you know, I bring up my shield just in time, or, you know, whatever. It's cool because I feel like it puts more weight on the players a little bit, and it takes a little bit of the weight off the GM's shoulders, where it's like, I'm not sitting here looking at a page-long stat block and having to adjudicate the rules. Like, I'm just telling you, roll this, and then tell me if you succeed or not.
Yeah, and it felt like that. It felt very light. The other cool thing is, because there are 4 general attributes that sort of cover things, it also makes it easy for me. So, you know, I'm like, all right, well, what sort of test do I want to give you? It's really easy to just have 4 and say, okay, here's power, which is my strength and all that stuff. And I liked how clear cut it was. So it wasn't 6, like, oh, is this wisdom or intelligence? It was like, no, this is presence. So that was really fun too, being able to pull from that and just throw stuff at you.
See, and that's interesting because when I first wrote Mecha Hack, it had 6 stats and it just used the regular D&D stats. So mechs had strength, dexterity, constitution. And then I was like, as I was sort of like thinking about, well, what does intelligence represent? Well, intelligence would be like computers, and like wisdom would be like your sensors and scanners and stuff. I was like, they should be rolled into one. And then I just from there decided, like, I'm going to super simplify this and make it just 4 things. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. And I feel like I rolled all 4 of those like a very equal amount. Like, I rolled plenty of presence and system in addition to my power and mobility. So it's all about how you want to challenge your players. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, when do you roll presence? I don't understand when you roll presence. And it's like, watch this game, because I rolled presence like 19 times and I failed every time. So
yeah, it's what I loved about, like, I would purposefully rotate. So I would try to throw things at you. I had prep notes. In between those prep notes was a ton of improv that you and I were doing. And so what I would do is think, all right, you know, power. All right, let's do some mobility here. The ground is mud.
Yeah.
Let's do some system as you know, and so it made it really easy to just choose, like, and then I didn't know exactly how a skill challenge was going to go. Which is why I tried to build in the damage on a failed save, because I thought, I just want this to have some sort of threat. I didn't want it to just be roll. Okay, good. Okay, now roll again. Ooh, you're a little further. I thought, no, I want this to tax. You just get to decide how much it taxes you.
Yeah. And you did a really good job of that, because that's like when I got to the boss fight, I was hurting. I think I was down to like 8 hit points when we started that fight. And that's a really good way to make a fight more challenging without just adding more damage and hit points to the enemy. Is like your players should be going into the fight with some of their resources already spent, whether that's spell slots, hit points, armor, ammunition, whatever you might be playing. Like, make them spend some of those resources in order to get to that fight. So you did a really good job of that.
Thanks, man. And I wanted it to feel like every choice you made was going to cost you something.
Yeah.
So it panned out, because a lot of that too comes down to the luck of the rolls and how you choose to act. But I thought, I want to make sure everything I throw at you is possibly going to tax you. Yeah. So nothing was just narrative. It was like, okay, narrative plus what's the cost to tax your game portion, your character sheet, so that you feel like you're in danger. Because my biggest fear was that if I didn't dial it in, you'd get to the end and be like, oh, cool. That was cool. That was good. That was a good walkthrough. I played this game on easy mode. And I thought, I want to make it feel like you're battered, destroyed. And so it worked out really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's, you know, the resources in this game, armor, hit points, and reactor die, like, you have to make decisions with all that, because your reactor die is tied to like, okay, well, I want to use this ability, but I'm going to have to roll my reactor die. My armor, I could have burned more armor early on, but I wanted to try and save it, because as a Maverick, I can use that armor to deal additional damage. And so it's like, I have to sit there and think like, do I want to use this armor now and deal some additional damage, or do I want to hold on to it because this thing is just hacking me in half right now, and I need armor to be able to soak some of this damage. So I really liked that aspect of it. I felt like every single round, like sometimes in combat, like a round is just like, oh, okay, I'll attack it. Every single round in this combat, that last combat, I was like, okay, like every action has to count. Every action has to matter.
Right. And that's a fun, simple economy. The hit points to the armor. Just that sort of back and forth, because it's all on you.
Yep.
But you get to dial in, like you said, okay, do I want to burn these now? Do I want to do it later? And then you also add in the risk reward of the reactor die.
Yep.
And for me, what that creates is this little player economy where even when you're not doing a ton of like brand new stuff, you can be doing the same things and the cost can get higher.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a fun thing, because it's not like, all right, let me look at my character sheet as a druid. I feel like I always use this. There's really not a lot of that, because you're like, man, okay, I could do that again, but it's going to cost me. Or, I can do this, but it's good. So I like that even built into just doing normal stuff, there's a little economy, which makes me feel like I'm doing more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree, man. And I'm glad that like comes across, and that has been the experience that people have had with this game. So,
yeah, man.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you again for running it.
For sure.
Again, to everyone watching, the links to check this game out are down in the description. There are links to a PDF copy on our website, link to physical books, which are going to be shipping here very soon. I have currently the only one in existence right here, and it's beautiful, filled with art by Hankrin Fernale of Runehammer Games. And there's also a link to, if you're more of a drive-through RPG person, there are links to the drive-through RPG one there as well. So I want to thank Tim again for running this game for me, and for always just being awesome. And I want to thank everyone for watching. Tim, anything you want to say as we close out here?
Just that if you haven't played this game, one of the coolest quotes that I've heard about it is, there were two people, and they're both wanting to run mech games. And this was a reviewer was kind of talking about this. And one has already been talking, well, I want to run a mech game in this system, and I want to use this, and I'm going to convert this to this. And that can be a blast. But while one person was talking about how they were going to run the mech game, the other person has already run 2 games using this system, because it's so easy to jump right into. So just know that I have never run this game. I have played in it once, and I was able to just dive right in. So pick up this book, because it is the perfect, I think, system for like a pickup game of mecha stuff just on a Saturday or Friday night. So that would be my only thing is, don't think, well, I don't really know the system. I've never played Black Hack. Fully inclusive, easy to use, totally awesome rule set.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah. And absolutely. At Absolute Tabletop, we make what we use. I wrote this game because there is not a mech game out there that allows me to just jump in and run a game with mechs, which is something I've always wanted to be able to do. So we just made it happen ourselves. So again, thank you everyone for watching. Tim, thanks for running the game, and take care, everyone. Happy gaming all, and we'll see you next time.